You've probably never heard of Harry Crews before. And no, I don't mean the actor. That's Terry Crews. But if you haven't heard of Harry Crews, then you certainly haven't read his 1976 novel, A Feast of Snakes. I can assure you that this book is so worth your time to read. It has some of the most beautiful prose I've ever read, but it's also one of the cruelest, weirdest, and realest books I've ever read. It goes places that most books, even the ones that claim to be disturbing and grotesque, are afraid to go. But to fully understand the book, you first need to understand the author. Harry Crews is not some academic douchebag like most authors you're thinking of. He's a crazy motherfucker who happens to also be one of the best writers you've never read. He was born dirt poor in 1935, Bacon County, Georgia, to a family of sharecroppers. At age 2, Harry's father died, and a few years later, his wife married his brother. As a child, Harry Crews suffered from infantile paralysis, and as a toddler, doctors told his mother multiple times that he would never walk again. His legs drew up behind him in this weird and terrifying way so that his ankles were tied up against his ass. The only way he could move was by laying down on the ground and pulling at the ground with both of his arms. His legs were so deformed, and it just looked so weird and creepy that wagons full of people in his town would stop in front of his yard just to point and stare and laugh at him as he crawled around. But by some miracle, when he was a little older, he gained the ability to walk again. But shortly after starting to walk, he fell into a vat of boiling water and injured himself so badly that he was bedridden for nearly a year. In an interview, Crews later said that his experience being a crippled child is what motivated him to write about the weirdos in society, freaks who were seldom humanized.
All kinds of freaks in my work. In the very first book, there's a midget with the biggest foot in the world. It's 27 inches long, I think, and 13, 14 inches wide. From the beginning, I was asked, why do you have those in your work? All right, let's just quietly back up to the beginning.
But despite his ailments, he became the first person in his family to graduate high school. And somehow, despite all odds, he ended up joining the Marines. After his time in the military, he used his GI Bill to attend the University of Florida, where he graduated in 1960 at age 25. In 1964, his first son drowned in a neighbor's pool. And in 1968, Crews published his first novel, The Gospel Singer, before going on to publish 15 novels, various collections of short stories, and teach many years as a professor of English at the University of Florida before dying in 2012 at age 76. One thing you'll notice as you read A Feast of Snakes is that the characters drink more alcohol than you might think is humanly possible. But in reality, it actually probably isn't much more than Harry Crews drank in his own life. Here are some stories from people who knew him.
So why don't you just come out and try it a week? No booze. You can stay out there. I'll cook. You got the lake house, the sailboat. Do whatever. Third day I come back. I had about 60 bottles of wine that I'd saved. All some real good. There were about 30 bottles of open wine. And Harry had just gone until he found one he liked. If he didn't like it, he just left it there and went on to another one. And he and this girl were out in the boat, naked, in the lake where I lived with all these people around. I had to go get them in the thing. And the next morning we woke up. He very sheepish. He said to me, I think you're going to have to take me home. I said, good. I won't take you home.
Walking up to the rooming house, and I saw this extension cord running through the grass. And for some reason, I followed the extension cord, and it led to an electric blanket that was under the bushes, and then under the electric blanket was my father, right? And I said, Harry, wake up, man, get up. And he rolled over, and there beside him, I'll never forget this, man, there was a little apple with one bite taken out of it, and beside the apple, there was a Vidalia onion, a little stew onion, and it had one bite taken out of it, too.
If he's binging, he is literally picking up a fifth of whiskey off the floor and drinks it until he gets to the point where he's almost comatose, and then he puts it back down and he goes out again.
Like I said, this was a crazy motherfucker. At the University of Florida, he could be seen walking around with a mohawk and a skull tattoo, and he was a well-known hellraiser. He got in so many bar fights that people around him called him the barroom brawler. In one interview, he claimed to be proud that he once got beaten in a fair fight by a one-legged Blackfoot Indian in Montana. Even just searching his name to see what people had to say about him on Reddit, I found this comment on a thread asking for people who had been taught by Harry Crews. Wasn't taught by him per se, but he once walked into a class, Southern Women's Literature, 1992, I was taking and started lecturing. He was drunk. 10 minutes later, the regular teacher walked in and let Harry know that he was in the wrong classroom. Outside of understanding who Harry Crews is, the best I can do to explain this book is exactly what Harry Crews does. He opens with a quote from a Richard Eberhart poem. If I could only live at the pitch that is near madness, when everything is as it was in my childhood, violent, vivid, and of infinite possibility, that the sun and moon broke over my head. It's such a beautiful quote, and it sums up the book in a way that you won't fully understand until you've read it yourself. That being said, as we move forward with the video, we're going to start with a summary of the book, and then we'll get into my analysis, which in the case of this book will probably just be more glazing of Harry Crews. I'll have a timestamp in the description if you want to skip along. And I do want to say, and I don't normally say this in these videos, that I highly recommend buying and reading this book yourself, either before or after watching the video. The writing is just so beautiful. So as I do my summary, I'm going to try and use as many direct quotes as possible to give you at least a little bit of a taste of Harry Crews' writing style. But again, I highly recommend going and reading the book yourself. Content warnings are on screen now, so please pause if you would like to review them. The novel opens in Mystic, Georgia in early November, at football practice with the town already swallowed by the image of the rattlesnake. Candy Sweet, who everyone calls Hard Candy, is one of the majorettes at Mystic High, standing in her leather sweater with a snake sewn across the front. Crews writes, she felt the snake between her breasts, felt him there, and loved him there, coiled. The deep tumescent S held rigid, ready to strike. She loved the way the snake looked sewn onto her V-neck leather sweater, his hard diamond-back pattern shining in the sun. It was unseasonably hot, almost 60 degrees, for early November in Mystic, Georgia, and she could smell the light musk of her own sweat. She liked the sweat, liked the way it felt, slick as oil, in all the joints of her body, her bones, and the firm sliding muscles, tensed and locked now, ready to spring, strike, when the band behind her fired up the school song, Fight On Deadly Rattlers of Old Mystic High. Across the field, Willard Miller, the current boss snake, star player, is practicing with the football team. Hard Candy watches him and tries to pick his grunts out from the other boys. The sounds he makes on the field remind her of the sounds he makes when they have sex. Willard is rough in everything. Loud, wet, heavy, and always looking for somebody to run through. The field itself is built around the snake image. The band forms the shape of a rattlesnake. The snare drums rattle under one goalpost, and fans shake gourds filled with dried seeds to imitate diamondbacks. Everybody in Mystic seems to have one. People carry them to games and to stores around town. Rattlesnake is not just the mascot. It is the sound, symbol, and religion of the place. Hard Candy is good at being a majorette. High knees, big smile, good skin, good teeth. Because it comes naturally, her mind wanders. As she performs, she notices Joe Lon Mackey standing under the end zone bleachers with a burlap sack in one hand and a drinking sack in the other. He winks. She winks back. She likes him, the way most people in Mystic like him. Though her older sister, Berenice, knows him much better. Berenice and Joe Lon were once the golden couple of Mystic. 2 years earlier, Berenice was head majorette, and Joe Lon was boss rattler, the star of the football team. He was tall, blonde, and famous to the county as a high school All-American. He could have played college football almost anywhere, but he never did. People politely say Joe Lon was not a good student, but still everyone loved him. His silence off the field was treated as courtesy, even though everyone also knew he had done terrible things, including once drowning a traveling salesman at July Creek while the football team watched from the bank. Hard Candy gets distracted and misses the band director's whistle. The snake formation strikes, and the other girls nearly run over her. Under the stands, Joe Lon finishes his bottle of bourbon, drops the empty bottle in the weeds, chews dentine, and lights a cigarette. He has been watching Hard Candy because she reminds him of Berenice, and of everything that might have happened for him, but did not. Jolan reaches into his pocket and pulls out a warm blue letter from Berenice. It says she will see him at rattlesnake time and is signed with love. It took him most of the afternoon to read it clearly, and once he understood it, it did not make him happy. It unsettled him. He thought he was finished with her. He folds the letter, puts it back, then takes it out again and tears it into tiny pieces under the bleachers. Before going home, Jolan drives beside the practice field and watches Willard run the ball against the weaker second-string players. He jukes one out and then goes out of his way to hit him anyway. Jolan tries to tell himself that there's more to the world than stepping on people, but he doesn't seem to believe it. Jolan has been drinking all day, but he does not feel drunk. He drives through Mystic, past the post office, past the jail, past Buddy Matlow's sheriff's car, and through the town where people wave or shake gourds at him. He barely notices. His mind is already on going home to Elfie and the babies, to the trailer where he lives in constant anger. Jolan's trailer sits outside town on a 10-acre field he has turned into a campground for the annual Rattlesnake Roundup. A banner welcomes visitors to Mystic. Before going inside, he takes the burlap sack to a fenced pen where metal barrels full of rattlesnakes are covered with chicken wire. He kicks the barrels and fills the enclosure with rattling. Then he uses a hook stick to lift the snake from the sack and drop it into one of the barrels. Inside, Elfie is at the sink. From behind, she still resembles the girl he married. Red hair, full hips, thin ankles. Then she turns, and Jolan sees her as ruined by pregnancy and motherhood. She has had 2 babies, close together, and her teeth have gone bad. One child is strapped in a high chair. The other lies in a bassinet. Elfie smiles and says that she has kept supper warm. Jolan immediately attacks her about her teeth. He says that he told her to go get them fixed. She says she's not had the time to see the dentist because of the babies. He tells her to leave them with somebody and go to Tifton. She agrees quietly. She serves biscuits and red-eye gravy, but the food sticks in Jolan's throat. Whiskey rises in him. Elfie asks if it was a bad day. He says he left George at the store and went snake hunting. She asks what he got. Then the older baby throws a spoon into the bassinet and hits the younger baby. Both babies start crying. Jolan explodes. He grabs the greasy biscuit, leans across the table, and stuffs it down the front of Elfie's dress. She does not move or even look at him. He shouts that what he got was filled up with her and the children. Then he leaves, kicking over a chair on the way out. Behind him, Elfie's crying joins the baby's crying until the whole trailer seems to be wailing. Outside, Jolan leans against the truck, trembling and sick. He wants to scream. Screaming is as close as he usually gets to crying. He admits to himself that Elfie is a good woman, but that he treats her like a dog. He knows marrying her while she was pregnant, then getting her pregnant again so soon after the first baby, wrecked her body and his nerves. But knowing this does not make him stop. The campground will soon be filled with snake hunters, radios, filth, and noise. He needs a drink. He drives back to the store, howling by the time he arrives. George is inside behind the counter. Jolan knows George hears him crying, but he knows George will not say anything. Finally, Jolan goes inside, avoiding George's eyes because howling makes him look like he's been crying. He wishes he still had Berenice's letter to look at while he drank. He tells George to get him a beer. George brings him a Budweiser Tallboy. Jolan asks what he sold that day, and George shows him tally marks. Beers, half pints, pints, bonded whiskey, and mason jars of moonshine. Jolan says it's not bad for a Thursday, and tells George to go home. George lingers and asks if he can take a drink, even though he has no cash. Jolan lets him take a half pint of shine, and puts it on his ticket. George and his brother Lummy work for Jolan the way they worked for Big Joe, Jolan's father. They are never really told what they make, only whether they're ahead or behind. George is behind, as always. But George has stayed behind for another reason. Buddy Matlow has locked up Lottie Mae again. Buddy claims she's a sporting lady, but Jolan knows what that means. Buddy, sheriff and public safety director of the town, locks up women who refuse to have sex with him. Mostly black women, but not always. Buddy was once a Georgia Tech football star, then a Vietnam veteran who lost his leg in the war. He believes his old glory and ruined body means he has the right to do whatever he wants. Jolan says he will talk to Buddy. George wants him to do it tonight. Jolan repeats that he will. Then he asks about the Johnny on the spots, the portable toilets for the campground. Lummy got them from Cordell, but they are still on the truck. Jolan tells George to make sure they are set out before the hunters arrive. Last year, Mystic was buried in human waste for 2 weeks. The roundup used to be small. Locals, farmers, a picnic, maybe a sack race. Then everyone going into the woods to pull diamondbacks out of the ground. They would eat snakes, drink corn whiskey, and be done. But then outsiders started coming. Now Mystic is famous for rattlesnakes, with prizes for biggest snake, longest snake, most snakes, first snake, last snake, and Mystic Rattler. With the crowds come money, filth, and chaos. The phone rings. It's Big Joe demanding whiskey. Jolan says George is gone. Big Joe complains. Jolan makes a cruel joke about sending Beater, his sister, to carry the bottle, saying maybe she would quit watching television and act normal. Big Joe warns him not to talk that way about his only sister. Jolan wants to shout that it was not God who struck Beater, but he does not. They have been over that too many times. Finally, he says he'll bring him the whiskey himself later. A carload of black customers pull up. They do not come inside. Jolan carries liquor out to them. Officially, they can enter. In practice, they can't. It has been that way since Big Joe ran the store. LeBeau County is dry except for beer, and Jolan's store is the only place for miles to buy liquor, so nobody complains. For the next hour, Jolan sells steadily and drinks. Then Hard Candy's white Corvette pulls up. The car bothers him because it used to belong to Berenice. Willard comes in first, big and blunt-headed, with a tiny snake printed over his heart. Hard Candy follows with her high-kneed walk. Nobody speaks at first. Then Willard says he and Hard Candy are bored. Jolan says he has a case of the can't help it's. They drink beer and whiskey. Hard Candy asks if they can feed one of Jolan's snakes. Jolan says maybe they should wait for someone to come in so they can bet, but nobody comes. Willard pushes him. The two men square up across the counter, smiling but tense. Jolan tells Willard that if he ever comes to make him do something, he should bring lunch, because he'll be staying a while. Jolan takes them into the back room, where 4 cages hold rattlesnakes and 1 holds white rats. Hard Candy pulls out a rat by the tail. They bring a snake cage to the counter. Jolan calls a snake beautiful. Willard says nothing is as pretty as a snake. Hard Candy says she is as pretty as one. They tell her almost, but not quite. Jolan gets a stopwatch, and they bet on how long it will take the snake to strike and swallow a rat. Hard Candy drops the rat into the cage. The rat lands, sniffs around, and then the snake rises. Nobody sees the strike. It's too quick. They only see the rat jerk as if hit by something invisible. The snake waits, touches the rat, opens its mouth, and begins swallowing. Just then, Buddy Matlow bursts in, joking that he's caught them being cruel to little animals again. He asks for beer and shine. Willard teases him about his wooden leg. Buddy teases Willard back. They joke about fighting each other. Willard and Hard Candy leave. Jolan and Buddy sit across the counter drinking. Jolan thinks about the Corvette and knows where Willard and Hard Candy are going. Dr. Sweet's drug cabinet, the way he and Berenice used to. Back then, he and Berenice would take pills, drink, drive, and try to decide what to do with the night. Cruz writes, that was the only decision there was once upon a time. What to do with the night. But that time is gone. Berenice graduated, got an Austin Healey, went to the University of Georgia, and left Jolan with the store. He remembers one night before a snake hunt when he and Berenice drove wildly in the Corvette, both high on Dexedrine, and ended up at the school field by the snake pit. She talked about college. They both pretended he was going to Alabama to play football, though they both knew he was going nowhere but the store. Berenice asked him to put her down in the snake pit. He did. She lay on the dirt floor, imagining all the snakes over and inside her, then told him to lie down with her. He refused at first, then joined her. Fear, sex, and snakes blurred together until Buddy's patrol car came tearing across the field. Buddy shouted out from the window while a dark woman sat silently beside him. Berenice lowered herself back on to Jolan anyway. Memory breaks. Jolan is back at the store with Buddy. He asks Buddy to let Lottie Mae go. Buddy says it's not any of his business. Jolan says it is, because it bothers the black people in town, and he needs them for the roundup. Buddy finally agrees. Buddy leaves angry, drives back to the jail, and sends Luther Peacock away to supper. Then he goes to Lottie Mae's cell. He tells her not to tell anyone that he loves her. She asks to be let go. He insists that he loves her. Then he turns over a bucket and releases a rattlesnake onto the floor. He says, either the snake is going into the cell, or I am. You choose. Lottie Mae stares at the snake and chooses Buddy. Buddy rapes Lottie Mae and then lets her go. Lottie Mae walks home in a daze. She barely remembers the road. The snake has taken over her mind. Cruz writes, her head was filled with his diamond pattern and lidless eyes, and a terror was growing in her that was beyond screaming or even crying. Jolan sees her while walking up the store and offers her a ride. She does not answer. He lets her pass and drives toward Big Joe's with the whiskey. At Big Joe's house, Jolan finds his father in the room where he trains fighting dogs. Big Joe is almost 7 feet tall, bald, nearly deaf, and watching Tough, his best fighting dog, on an electric incline treadmill. Tough is strapped in and exhausted. His legs buckle, but the treadmill keeps turning. His knees scrape and bleed. A weight hangs from his lower jaw to strengthen his bite, stretching his mouth into a raw gape. The only sound is his wet breathing and his paws on the treadmill. Jolan gives Big Joe the bottle. Big Joe drinks, asks about Elfie, and says she is a good woman. Jolan says he knows how lucky he is. Through the wall comes Beater's television. Beater, Jolan's sister, almost never leaves her room. The television is always on. Big Joe talks to Tough, urging him to work harder. Jolan says the dog is taking a killing. Big Joe says, not yet. Tough has won 4 fights, and after the next one, Big Joe plans to retire him and make a stud. The dog is scarred, torn, and nearly blind in one eye. But to Big Joe, he is still valuable, still something to sharpen and use. Jolan leaves, but in the hall he sees the light under Beater's door. He remembers Beater as she once was, a pretty 10th grade cheerleader, cheering for him. Now she lies in a stinking room, watching television and barely speaking. He opens the door, and the smell hits him. Beater is in bed with the covers under her chin. He asks how she is, when she has last left the room, when she last bathed, but she doesn't answer. Under the bed is the chamber pot she uses instead of a bathroom, because she does not ever leave the room. Jolan pulls it out because he thinks it needs to be emptied, and he knows that the cook has not come that day. It was full of water, and on the surface floated 3 dark turds. He asks Beater why she lives like this, but Beater just keeps watching television. Then she takes the pot, takes one of the turds in her hand, and shoves it into her hair. Jolan tries to stop her, but he can't. Television keeps flickering. He leaves with pity and disgust. The next morning, Lottie Mae is sent to Big Joe's because her mother, the usual cook and caretaker of Beater, is sick and cannot cook or empty Beater's slop jar. Lottie Mae is terrified from the night before. Cruz writes, white people were dangerous and snakes were dangerous, and now the two were working together, each doing what the other told it to. She was sure she had seen a snake in a weeded ditch with the head of a white man, right after she came out of the house on the way to Big Joe's, which she had immediately forgotten. Saw it, long and black and diamond patterned in the ditch with a white man's head. It had blue eyes, the bluest eyes any white man ever had. She was sure she had seen it. She thought she had seen it. Maybe it was only a dream or a memory of another time. Whatever it was, she still saw it every time she closed her eyes. Coiled there on the back of her eyelids, blue-eyed and dangerous. Big Joe tells Lottie Mae not to forget Beater's food and slop jar. She makes flapjacks because Beater will not eat eggs or meat. Beater eats with her hands while a game show plays. Lottie Mae stands by the window and watches Brother Boy chase chickens outside. After Beater eats, Lottie Mae says she is afraid it might rain snakes. Beater says it might. Lottie Mae says she does not know what to do. Beater says she does. After a long pause, Beater tells her plainly, kill it. Lottie Mae says that she could not kill anything. Beater tells her to hide. Lottie Mae says there's no place to hide. Beater asks if she has a gun. Lottie Mae says no. A knife? No. A razor? Lottie Mae says yes. Beater tells her never to be without it. The scene shifts back to Jolan's trailer. Willard has come over. Jolan is wired on black coffee and whiskey. Elfie is in a good mood because Jolan, after drinking, told her the yellow apron she was wearing was pretty. She cooks steak, eggs, and biscuits for Jolan and Willard. By morning, the roundup is fully awake. Jolan walks the grounds, checks the store, speaks to visitors, and keeps the operation moving. Lummy thanks him for getting Buddy to let Lottie Mae go, and says something is wrong with her and thinks she may be hexed. Jolan half listens and says he will tell Buddy to find out who hexed her. Jolan runs into Coach Tump Walker, his old coach and the honorary chairman of the roundup. Coach Tump says the tourists get crazier and crazier every year and asks about Big Joe and Tough. Jolan says Tough is ready. Coach Tump praises Big Joe's dogs, and Jolan tells him to go by to the store and get whatever he wants on Jolan's tab. Then Jolan sees Berenice across the campground. He wants to run, either toward her or away from her. She sees him first and runs to him with her arms open, calling him handsome and saying he's the best football player to ever put on a helmet. Jolan immediately senses something is wrong, because he knows that normally she would have said jockstrap and not helmet. Her body feels familiar and wrong. She's been away at the University of Georgia and even to Paris. Jolan tells her she looks good and starts to mention the letter, but then he sees a man behind her. Berenice introduces the man as Shep, a University of Georgia student on the debate team. Jolan immediately hates him. His careful clothes, soft face, slick hair, and polite voice. Shep shakes his hand and says he has heard a lot about Jolan's football career. Berenice asks about Elfie and the children. Shep jokes that the boys must be running backs and punches Jolan on the shoulder. Jolan steps away because he's afraid that he's going to hit Shep. At the trailer, Elfie wears the yellow apron and says she called the dentist in Tifton to get her teeth fixed. She says she did it for Jolan, not herself. Then she tells him she and the babies love him. Jolan grips the table and has to fight not to howl. After Elfie leaves for the grocery store with the babies, Willard teases Jolan about Berenice. He has seen her too. He asks about Shep, and they mock the idea of the debating team as if it were some weak man's sport. Through the window, the campground fills with dust, vehicles, children, and people carrying snakes. Jolan tells Willard that Big Joe wants them to handle Tough at the dogfight. Willard is proud. Then they head out to the campground with whiskey. They pass Victor, the snake-handling preacher from Virginia who comes every year to buy diamondbacks for his church. Willard insults him. Jolan tells him to leave Victor alone because Victor really believes in snakes and God and is marked all over from bites. The book then moves into part 2. Duffy Dieter and Susan Gender are inside Duffy's modified Winnebago. Duffy is a lawyer and extreme athlete from Florida. Susan is a graduate student, bored and attached to him. After sex, Duffy dresses for a workout. Susan says she does not like snakes. Duffy asks why she came. She says he brought her. Duffy says he never gets enough of anything. Outside, Duffy sets up a weight bench. Jolan and Willard size him up. At first he looks small, but once he strips down to work out, they see he's thick and strong. Susan appears in the doorway, and Jolan and Willard stare. Duffy enjoys their staring because she belongs to him. Susan says she's a graduate student, and Jolan thinks everyone is in college except him. Jolan and Willard show off with handstand dips, then join Duffy at the weights. Duffy proves to be stronger than expected. An old Cuban man, Enrique Ponce Gomez, appears looking for Duffy. Jolan and Willard frighten him, especially when Jolan thinks that Ponce reminds him of a traveling salesman, and he grips Ponce's neck a little too hard. Duffy and Susan watch, amused at how Jolan and Willard bully Ponce. Hard Candy arrives and asks what they are doing to the little man. Hard Candy arrives and asks what they are doing to the man, so they let him go. Hard Candy and Susan discover they were both majorettes and start twirling together. The men keep lifting. Duffy can press a lot of weight, but Jolan and Willard finally beat him as they reach over 300 pounds. Duffy resents it. Jolan and Willard nearly turn on each other, but Susan interrupts by saying she wants to go to a honky-tonk and dance. She says that she wants to shake her ass. They start talking about driving there, and Ponce mentions that he has a Porsche. Jolan and Willard force Ponce to let them drive the Porsche while he sits in the back seat. Jolan and Willard take him for a terrifying drive, pushing the car brutally through curves until Willard vomits at the window. They end up at the Blue Pines bar. Duffy beats Jolan and Willard at pool. Susan dances with Ponce. Jolan and Willard, angry from losing, grab Ponce and turn his body into a joke, jerking and punching him between them while calling it dancing. By the end, they scare Ponce so bad that he shits himself. Duffy dances with Hard Candy and proves good at that too. The group leaves Ponce in the parking lot and returns to Jolan's place to eat snake. Jolan kills and skins snakes from barrels, whipping them, nailing them to a board, and stripping them with pliers. Elfie watches from the trailer doorway with the baby in her arms. Jolan feels ashamed. then tells her he thought they would cook up snake and have a feast. Elfie brightens and explains how she cooks it. Inside, Jolan puts on Merle Haggard. Elfie cooks, the others drink. Jolan asks Hard Candy to call Berenice and invite her. Berenice arrives with 2 batons, saying Shep stayed behind with her father because he is considering becoming a brain surgeon, and the idea of snake steak upsets his digestion. Berenice and Susan brighten over college talk. Jolan, Willard, and Hard Candy sit drunk and unsmiling. Elfie comes in with flour on her apron, sees Berenice, and loses a little bit of her smile. Berenice hugs her and praises the babies. Jolan asks Berenice if she wants a drink. She asks for something light. Elfie offers to get it, and Berenice follows her into the kitchen. Willard jokes about how Berenice used to drink hard. Jolan tells him to get everybody out after they eat, except for him and Berenice, because Jolan wants to ventilate her. After the snake supper and more drinking, Susan suggests she and Hard Candy go outside for a twirl-off. Everyone can judge. That gives Jolan his opening. Everyone files out of the house, but Jolan grabs Berenice and tells her to stay inside. Duffy looks back once and sees Jolan's face gone gray and tight. Jolan grabs Berenice. She says they cannot do it there, but she is already reaching for him. Jolan takes Berenice down the hall. Outside, Susan and Hard Candy twirl while Willard, Duffy, and Elfie watch. Elfie keeps looking back toward the trailer. Inside, Berenice talks while her and Jolan have sex. She tells Jolan she loves Shep. He says he does not want to hear it. She says loving Shep does not mean she didn't used to love him. Then she starts talking about baton twirling, competitions, judges, rules, and how exact it all is. Jolan asks what good it is. She keeps talking. Outside, the babies begin crying. Elfie continues watching the trailer. Jolan's mind turns to his mother. He once left Big Joe, Peter, and Mystic for Billy, traveling shoe salesman. Cruz writes, and the bitterest, most painful thing Jolan ever had to do was admit to himself that his mother had been fucking that little shoe salesman for reasons of love, when she had a house and a husband and children and a flower garden and friends and a hometown and a son famous to the whole South and meals to cook and clothes to wash. A woman like that? No, not a woman. His mother, lying down on her back with a little man who walked always leaning slightly to the right from carrying a heavy suitcase full of shoe samples. What Jolan cannot bear is not only that his mother left, but that she left for love. Big Joe went to Atlanta and brought her back by force. Later, Peter came home from cheerleading practice and found their mother in the rocker, wearing Big Joe's black tie around her neck and her face under a plastic bag. Cruz writes, her starting eyes were open under the plastic, and her face was blue. The note pinned over her breast was not addressed to anyone. It said, "Bring me back now, you son of a bitch." Beater was never the same. The narrative shifts to Lottie Mae at the roundup. She moves through the crowd with the razor hidden at her ankle. A man with a snake around his neck tries to frighten her. She stands still, then turns away. He calls after her but does not follow. Later, near the road through the pine thicket, Buddy's blue light appears around her, and she knows he has come for her. Buddy gets her into his Plymouth and drives away from the town. He corrects how she speaks to him, tells her not to call him Mr. or Sir, tells her again and again that he loves her, and asks if she told anyone about the jail. She says no. He talks as if what he did to her was love. She sits beside him, stiff and terrified, but calmer now because Beater has told her what she has to do. Buddy makes her look at him. In her mind, he becomes the snake she has been fearing. Not just Buddy, but Buddy and Snake and White Danger fused together. Then Lottie Mae acts. She pulls the razor out from her shoe and slices the snake. His penis. Clean in half. Cruz writes, You cut it off, Buddy finally managed to say. She said, I always known I could. I always known I would. She opened the door and got out. Buddy Matlow struggled behind the wheel. He looked at her and made a noise. Not a word, just a noise. There was still no pain, but he had gone instantly lightheaded with terror and loss of blood. He knew he was dying. He knew he ought to be doing something, but he did not know what it was. Lottie Mae bent and looked at him through the window. Lottie Mae goes to see Beater. Beater is screaming with the television until she sees the razor. Then she quiets. Lottie Mae shows her the blade, and they talk. Cruz writes, Close as breathing, said Lottie Mae. Looked into my eyes, breathed into my nose, put his taste on my tongue, all up in my mouth, and made me swallow him. Felt him grow in my hair, move in my stomach. When I went on my knees to pray, Snake had the ear of the Lord. You was scared? Peter asked. Scared to death, said Lottie Mae. You cry? All the time. And was you afraid to go out? Wouldn't go out unless I had to. And was you afraid to come in? Wouldn't come in neither unless I had to. It had you covered all around, said Beater. Lottie Mae says Beater was right. One cut with the razor, and the snake was gone. Then the scene shifts to Dr. Sweet's house. Buddy is there. He knocks on the door, and when it opens, he reveals his injury. Dr. Sweet, Shep, and others are there. Cruz writes, they saw the blood before the coat was all the way open. Buddy was slick with blood. The doctor did not move. From Buddy's shoulders to his knees, he was smooth and slick with creamy gouts of blood. And it was obvious that it was coming from between his legs. Dr. Sweet was numb. His mind had simply quit. The worst he had ever seen was a man whose tongue had been deliberately split in two by a knife, and another man who had been scalped. They had both been dead when he saw them, and they had both been black. But this, he knew from the blood, from the nature of the bleeding, what had happened, and so he could not make himself move from where he stood as Buddy slowly reached out and put this toy snake in Shep's outstretched hand. Shep accepted the snake because he was unable to do anything else. It was bloody on the end and tiny, and as he watched unbelieving, the hole inside of the snake slipped out into his palm, and it was not a snake. It was a dick. Back at Jolan's trailer, the group is preparing to leave for the burning of the 30-foot snake and the crowning of Miss Rattlesnake. Berenice wants Shep, but they cannot reach him. He refuses to go unless he comes. Hawk turns to pageants. Hard Candy says Miss Rattlesnake has been in the family 2 years in a row. Berenice won as a senior, Hard Candy as a sophomore. Elfie appears in the hallway and says she should get the babies ready for the sitter. She forgets not to smile, shows her bad teeth, then remembers and closes her mouth. Jolan sees it and feels rage. A young girl has arrived to babysit. Jolan says they need to get out before the snake burns without them. By the time they move, the private damage in the trailer has happened. Lottie Mae has done what Beater told her to do. Buddy is dying, and the public ceremony of the roundup is still pushing forward. They leave for the snake burning. Berenice does not go with them. Still frantic about Shep, she gets in her Austin Healey and tears out alone. Elfie takes Jolan's arm and says, "Let's go, honey." She and Jolan get into the pickup. Willard rides with Duffy and Susan and the Winnebago. The roads are clogged with cars, campers, drunk people, children, and snake hunters. In the pickup, Elfie tells Jolan she wishes he would not treat her like a fool. He pretends not to know what she means. He says she is not a fool, even if people think she is. She knows what happened in the trailer when everyone went outside. She knows she is not Berenice and does not talk like Berenice, but she is his wife and the mother of his children. Jolan tries to shut her down, but her words sit between them as they creep toward the school grounds. At the school, the giant constructed snake dominates the field. The pageant stage is nearby. The crowd is drunk, hot, loud, and past order. The principal wants the pageant to proceed properly, with introductions and measurements, but the crowd wants fire, noise, and blood. Jolan ends up near the microphone, trying to help manage things. His voice barely matters. Then Duffy comes flying out of the crowd and kicks a huge bearded man in the head. Blood bursts from the man's face. Willard joins immediately, grinning and fighting. What had been a pageant turns into a brawl. The first contestant, Novella Watkins, comes out anyway. She is Hard Candy's rival and the obvious future queen. She moves across the stage with confidence while fighting happens in front of her. The principal keeps reading her measurements and accomplishments as if the ceremony still makes sense. The plan is supposed to be that Miss Rattlesnake is crowned and then lights the giant snake. But someone touches the snake with a torch too early, and the whole thing catches fire. The field lights up. The contestants continue circling on stage. In front of the stage, the men collapse into kicking, cursing, gouging, and fighting. Jolan sees Coach Tump, Willard, and Duffy in the fight. He knows they could get hurt. He turns away anyway. He drops from the stage, moves through the crowd, passes between cars and campers, and slips onto a dim woods road toward the store. The further he gets from the fire and screaming, the better he feels. At the store, Lummy is behind the counter. He asks why people are hollering. Jolan does not answer. He asks if George brought extra beer and whiskey. Lemmy says yes. Joe Lon climbs onto the stool and tells Lemmy to feed the remaining snake and bring him bonded whiskey. Lemmy uses pliers to put a rat in the cage because he does not want to touch anything to do with snakes. Then he reports the day's sales while Joe Lon barely listens. Lemmy understands his place. He is a black man. Joe Lon is the white man. The road is the road. The tree is the tree. That is the way the world is in Mystic. The next morning, the campground looks like a battlefield. A trailer is overturned. Trash, cups, wrappers, clothes, and wrecked cars scatter the road. Coach Tump, Willard, and Duffy come to get Joe Lon. He comes out puffy-faced and bloodshot. They ride to Big Joe's for the dogfight, talking about the previous night and how they made sure Novella Watkins was crowned. At Big Joe's, dogs are already in cages on pickup trucks and men sit in the bleachers drinking and talking. Joe Lon brings Tuffy into the pit to rub him down. Tuffy is scarred, ragged, and ready. Then Joe Lon sees Elfie and Berenice sitting together in the bleachers, solemn and unsmiling. The sight frightens him. He does not know what they have said to each other. Willard comes down and tells him Buddy Matlow is dead. Dr. Sweet said Buddy was dead before they got him to the hospital. Joe Lon feels sick. The dogfight is about to begin. The fight has the feeling of a private ceremony, something older and meaner than the public roundup. Men shout bets. Joe Lon kneels in the pit with Tuffy while the other dogs bark in their cages. The opposing dog is Devil, another proven fighter. The fight is run by Louisiana rules. The dog does not have to die. If he will face, he can fight. If he will not face, he loses. Willard handles Tuffy. The other handler brings Devil in. Coach Tump watches. Big Joe watches like he is looking at his own blood. The referee calls for the dogs to roll. Tuffy and Devil hit in the middle of the pit. They lock, tear, separate, and face again. Tuffy gets Devil by the neck. Devil gets into Tuffy's belly. They are slick with blood, but neither hits a major vessel. Between rounds, their jaws have to be pried open. As the fight goes on, Joe Lon is carrying everything else. Buddy dead, Elfie and Berenice sitting together. The burning snake, Victor, Motherwell, the crowd, and the feeling that every symbol of Mystic is turned and pointed at him. Earlier, Victor had come toward him at the pit with Motherwell, speaking in his preacher voice about God and snakes. Motherwell rolled rattles in her hand. To Joe Lon, Victor had not come simply to buy snakes. He had come as part of everything closing in around him. Joe Lon starts howling into the sky. Willard hits him hard enough to knock him out of the pit. Big Joe yells for him not to go crazy like Beater. The dogs go wild. Even Tuffy lifts his head and howls. Joe Lon wakes in a dark room in Big Joe's house. Elfie is there. Willard stands beside the bed. Through the wall is Beater's television, and beyond that the sound of men and dogs. Elfie tries to take back something she said and tells him she loves him. Joe Lon asks what time it is. Willard says almost midnight, and says Joe Lon went down for the count. Dr. Sweet gave him a shot. They brought him to Big Joe's because they were afraid he might do something at home. Willard asks what went wrong. Cruz writes, "I don't know," he said. And he didn't. But he knew he'd been scared there in the pit as he'd never been scared before. It was not any one thing that scared him. It was everything. It was his life. His life terrified him. He didn't see how he was going to get through the rest of it. He was miserable beyond measure. Everything seemed to be coming apart. He could see the frayed and ragged seams of everything slowly unraveling. Willard says that anybody can go a little crazy. He says he thinks he broke 3 of Shep's ribs because when Joe Lon started howling, Shep was the closest thing to hit. Joe Lon asks what was wrong with the preacher. Willard says nothing. Victor was just putting in his snake order. Joe Lou says he does not want to talk about it. Outside, a ragged cheer comes from the pit. Willard says he has to get Tuffy because it is his turn again. Joe Lon says he's coming. He returns to the pit, where the fight has slowed into exhaustion and blood. Tuffy is badly hurt. Devil is badly hurt. The dogs are sent to face again. Cruz writes, when the referee had them face again, there was no doubt. Tuffy turned, meaning he lost. Before the referee could declare the winner and have Tuffy withdrawn, Big Joe, the tails of his enormous black coat flapping behind him, leapt over the barrier into the pit. He caught Tuffy against the boards. He and the crowd howled with a single voice while Big Joe kicked the dog to death. After that, the crowd turns worse. They start tearing down the bleachers. They might tear down the house too. But Joe Lon comes out with Big Joe's shotgun and fires 4 rounds into the air. The blast pushes the crowd back. Jolan takes Tuffy's body behind the field to an old storm-blasted pine tree where buzzards roost. He pulls the dog off the tailgate and leaves him there. Then he goes home. That night, Jolan sleeps for real. He gets carefully into bed beside Elfie, closes his eyes, and listens to his heart. Elfie takes his hand and lets her hold it. She says goodnight. He says goodnight. She says things will be different tomorrow. He says all right. Cruz writes, he knew and accepted for the first time that things would not be different tomorrow. Or ever. Things got different for some people, but for some they did not. There were a lot of things you could do, though. One of them was to go nuts trying to pretend things would someday be different. The next morning, the roundup continues. There are plenty of reasons to cancel the hunt. Buddy is dead, the campground is wrecked, water is short, toilets are overflowing, and the crowd is dangerous. But Coach Tump and the others decide canceling would be worse. The people came for snakes, so they will have snakes. Before the hunt begins, a man runs screaming from the woods. It's Tommy Hugh, who brought a giant snake with him. Coach Tump follows and finds men, women, and children chopping the harmless snake apart with hatchets. When they are done, they stand in the blood and guts, then walk away. Tommy Hugh kneels with the snake's head in his lap, crying that Coach Tump would have stopped him if it had been a dog. Coach Tump feels sick, but only calls him tainted and walks away. Back at the table, Coach Tump tells the others. Jolan sits in the pickup, staring toward the dark pines and scrub oak ridge where the hunt will begin. Big Joe's shotgun rests nearby. Teams are lining up. One person with a stick, one with a hose, one with gasoline. Hundreds more wait behind them. Coach Tump says it is time. Luther Peacock hits into the pickup with Jolan, taking Buddy's place. Willard and Duffy stay back to help hold the crowd. Jolan drives toward the ridge. Final snake hunt begins with the whole town knowing it should probably not happen. Jolan and Luther drive ahead of the crowd to a sandy ridge of scrub oak and palmetto where gopher holes cut into the ground. That is where the rattlesnakes shelter. At the top, a chicken wire and plywood snake pen waits with scales and tags. Mystic football players will weigh and measure the snakes. Cheerleaders led by Novella Watkins will record the numbers. Luther has the red handkerchief for the signal. Jolan tells him to wait. From the ridge, Jolan can see the campground, his trailer of the football players and cheerleaders moving ahead, and the long line of hunters straining below. In the distance, he can see Big Joe's house and wonders if Beater is watching. She has told him she watches the hunters climb the hill every year. Luther says they have to start. Jolan says he guesses they do. Luther lifts the handkerchief. The hunters break. They charge into the trees with snake sticks raised, yelling as they climb. Jolan goes back to the truck, takes whiskey from the glove compartment, and sits with the door open. The sky is low and cold. Hunters drop to their knees at gopher holes. One pushes a hose into the burrow. Another pours gasoline. If a snake is inside, the fumes drive it out, and the person with the stick catches it. Snakes begin coming up. Fire burns behind the pen. Smoke rises into the fog. Hunters stand across the ridge with rattlesnakes stretched from their poles to the ground. Ponce has gotten himself onto a team and handles the gasoline. When his team draws out a 5-foot rattler, he dances in excitement, leans close, hisses at it, and spits into its mouth. Then he sees Jolan watching and grows shy. Ponce comes over to Jolan and says hello. Jolan says nothing. Ponce says he does not care about what happened at the bar, and that he knows why Jolan did it. He says he would rather be on that hill with the snakes and Jolan than anywhere else in the world. Then he goes back. Willard, Duffy, and Coach Tump come up to the truck. Jolan hands Coach Tump the whiskey because he is afraid he will be asked to speak and will not be able to. The bottle passes around. Luther says he has never touched a snake and does not understand how the hunters do it. Cruz writes, everywhere in front of them, the dark silhouettes of men are joined to the earth by the thick, stretched bodies of snakes. The sky gave no light at all now, except where the thin white disk of sun hung in the east. Then Victor appears among the hunters. He has been moving through the crowd all morning, urging them on in his preacher voice. Now he steps from behind the snake pit, strips to the waist, reaches into his coat, and lifts a rattlesnake in each hand. He raises them over his head and begins shouting scripture. Something becomes clear inside Jolan. All morning he has felt that he is going to do something, but he has not known what. Seeing Victor with the snakes in his hands gives it shape. Victor staggers across the ridge, shouting good and evil. The hunters move away from him. When Victor steps into the line between Jolan and the distant twin-gabled house, Jolan reaches for Big Joe's shotgun. He takes it, steps out of the truck, and shoots Victor in the chest. The rage stops. Jolan pumps the shotgun. Luther Peacock is beside the truck, horrified. Jolan fires again and kills Luther. Someone pleads. A child cries. Jolan walks forward, pumps the shotgun again, and raises it. The barrel passes Shep and settles on Berenice. He fires and kills her. He pumps again and shoots the nearest hunter. Then the gun is empty. Only seconds have passed. Victor, Luther, Berenice, and another person are down. The crowd freezes. Then someone screams for them to get Jolan. The hunters rush him as one body. Jolan does not drop his gun. He waits. They seize him, lift him, and carry him to the snake pit. They throw him in. Jolan falls into the mass of snakes. He goes under and comes back up like a swimmer. For a moment, he gets his feet beneath him. Snakes hang from his face, killing him. Cruz writes, as he was going down again, he saw, or thought he saw, his sister Beater in her dirty white nightgown squatting off on the side of the hill with Lottie Mae, watching. Wow. Man, I don't even fully know how to explain why I loved this book so much. And that ending, I mean, I feel like so many authors would have dragged it out for 10, 20, 30 more pages, that ending, but it was just so sudden and so surprising, but not surprising. It's like the whole book, I knew it was building up to something, but I didn't know what it was. And it happened. It's just so sudden. He just grabs a shotgun and starts shooting people. And it doesn't make sense at first. And then it just feels right after a minute. But I'm having these thoughts and the book's already over. And so, I don't know. I hope at least some of you have either already read this book and feel the same way I do and just love it so much, or that you plan to go and read the book and will eventually feel the same way that I do. I wrote a little bit of a script for this analysis, as I always do, but it kind of just turned into me rambling on the page because I really don't know what to say. I don't know why I love this book. I don't know why it's so special to me. I'm going to be rambling, and I might not make any sense, but I'm honestly too overwhelmed by this book to say anything kind of smart about it. I just hope at least a couple of the things I say will resonate with some of you. A Feast of Snakes shows a world that's sweaty, nasty, cruel, violent, racist, sexist, gross, and full of people doing awful things to themselves and each other. But somehow, at the exact same time, the book is beautiful. And I mean like genuinely beautiful. The writing is beautiful, but there's also something just so truthful about the story. Cruz talks in many interviews about the process of discovering, and I've seen him describe multiple times the process of boiling a pig in a vat of boiling water and then slicing its skin clean off. It feels like Cruz is looking at life with all the skin, all the fluff, peeled off. The main character, Jolan, is mean. His best friend is mean. His dad is mean. Terrible people. The book is all wet, bad teeth, whiskey, blood, shame, sex, and violence, and always about someone dominating someone weaker than them. Like the way that Willard and Jolan treat Ponce. They scare him so bad that he shits himself, all because they think that the most fun they can have is dominating someone else. I think we see a lot of that in the real world. Maybe not so much people actually taking it as far as it goes at some points in this book, but always wanting to dominate a conversation or dominate a company or a country, or maybe sometimes we, and I mean me too, just find ourselves sometimes, even in our own head, thinking that we're dominating someone else, thinking that we're better than them. I think this book is a reminder of what not to be like and what not to be okay with. Mystic, Georgia, and this snake world is just such an amazing setting. Page 1, the whole town feels rotten. The football team is the Rattlers, the majorettes wear snakes on their sweaters, The fans shake gourds that sound like snakes. The town has a rattlesnake pageant, a rattlesnake hunt, rattlesnake eating, rattlesnake burning. Everything is about snakes. Everybody is coiled up. Everybody is waiting to strike. Everybody is poisonous in some way. And it's not just the town. It's the whole world, this culture of cruelty that's not just true in the novel, but true in our lives. And that's what I think the book is really about. A town where violence has become normalcy. Mystic dresses it up as football, tradition, sports, masculinity, sex, religion, pageantry, and entertainment. But underneath all of it is just people trying to prove that they're not the weakest thing in the room. And Jolan is the perfect center of all of that. He's abusive, racist, cruel, pathetic, and violent. But somehow I understand him and I find myself rooting for him all the time, even though I know I shouldn't. For one, it's a testament to how good of a writer Harry Crews is, but it's also a testament to how rooted his writing is in human nature. Honestly, I think I see the bad parts of myself in Jolan, and I hate liking him, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't. And that's even though I disagree with almost everything he does. I don't agree with hardly any of his beliefs. I don't agree with hardly any of his actions. But yet I see myself in him in the way that he feels about himself. Jolan used to matter. He was the football star, the boss rattler. His whole identity was built around his body and his ability to hurt people in a way that made crowds cheer. Then high school ended and now he's 22 years old, but his life already feels over. I kept finding myself thinking he was 40 or 50. He has a wife he resents, 2 babies he can't handle, a liquor store he doesn't care about, a father he hates, a sister he can't save, and an ex-girlfriend who escaped when he couldn't. I'm trying not to sound cringy, but I think we all want to escape something that we can't. And we all hate and love the people who do escape. I hate Shep. I fucking hate Shep. He did nothing wrong. He's a soft little college guy who I'm a lot more similar to him than I am to Jolan. I find myself hating Shep the same way that Jolan does. Hope that doesn't make me seem crazy. Probably does. But to me, him and Berenice are just proof that life goes on without you. In this book, the scariest thing to me is realizing that every bad thing Jolan does is because he's scared of life. And he's scared of the exact same thing that I am. Waking up tomorrow and still being myself. I'm not saying I don't like my life, but I'm not content. And I'm afraid of staying where I am now. His anger and inability to grow is manifesting into this terrible cruelty that riddles everything in his life and everything in the book. He drinks, he howls, he abuses Elfie, he humiliates Ponzi, he chases Berenice, he watches violence, he creates violence. Jolan and Willard don't hurt Ponzi because they need to do it. They do it because he's there. And then I think about the dogfight. Elfie. He's been trained to fight, praised for fighting, and used up by fighting, and loved only as long as he wins. The second he shows weakness, the second he loses, Big Joe just kills him brutally, kicking him to death in front of a crowd that's screaming with him. And then the ending, like I said, it's perfect. I don't even know what else to call it. Like, town spends the entire book worshiping snakes, and when Jolan finally breaks, they throw him into the snake pit. It's ridiculous, it's brutal, but it's symbolic and it's literal and it's completely inevitable. Mystic sacrifices him to their god. And that last image of Beater and Lottie Mae watching, it's insane. They're the 2 insane people. But are they really fucking insane? They understand the world better than anyone. Lottie Mae understands it because she killed her snake. Beater understands it because she's been living in violence, but not being the violence for so long. The book is disgusting and cruel and perfect, and I don't know how else to describe it. I don't even think I understand it. But it did something for me in a way that I can't explain. I really hope some of you will understand what I'm trying to say. Or maybe you'll think I'm crazy. I don't know. Hey, thank you guys so much for sticking around until the end of the video. This was such a fun video to make because I freaking love this book, if you couldn't tell. and I only read it recently, but I immediately knew that I wanted to make a video about it. I think I decided I was going to make a video about it when I was like 30 pages in, because I realized something special was happening with this book and with me, and in a way, this relationship that I was creating with the book and with Harry Crews, RIP, as I read it. But anyway, I really hope you guys did enjoy the video, and if you did, be sure to subscribe. I'm hoping to hit, or my goal is to hit 10,000 subscribers by the end of 2026. I don't think it's very likely, but you know, we're gonna aim for the moon, hit the stars, or the clouds, or something like that. But yeah, I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.